Part 65. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 641. Chapter 641 Who married Fan Kinjeo? Bailey Rongs couldn't figure out what went wrong, but the fact was that it was beyond his control. Seeing his father giving Bailey Fengming a seat, Bailey Rongs was so angry that his back teeth hurt from the bite. I heard that the relationship between the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess is very close, but none of us in the royal family are dedicated. Originally, I wanted to persuade His Highness the Crown Prince, but now it seems that I was overly worried. After all, His Highness the Crown Prince has always been, holding the Crown Princess in the palm of your hand. Since Bailey Rongs has entered the palace, it is impossible for him to leave in defeat. Bailey Fengming listened to this and said with a calm expression, "What the third emperor brother said is that I dare not disobey my father's instructions." Bailey Rongs. What does this have to do with my father? Should you marry Fan Kinjeo, or should your father marry you? Of course Bailey Rongs didn't know that Bailey Fengming was ordered to show affection. So now that Bailey Fengming had put the blame on the emperor, Emperor Yongchang's expression began to change. Why, do I have to report to you when I do anything in the future? After all, Emperor Yongchang still favored Bailey Rongs because of concubine Yu's favor. But even so, Bailey Rongs was so frightened that he knelt on the ground. "Father, please calm down, but your sons and ministers will not dare." Naturally, Emperor Yongchang would not explain so much to his son, nor did he think of blaming anyone. He just looked at Bailey Fengming and said, "I have sent people to secretly investigate the matter of Princess Rui. I believe it will be solved soon. I will restore the innocence of the Crown Princess. Since you took the initiative to inform Dali Temple of the matter, Dali Temple will leave it to you." Bailey Fengming quickly knelt down to thank him. "My son, I would like to thank my father." They are both kneeling on the ground, but their thoughts are completely different. Bailey Fengming still had a calm expression on his face, as if he were an emotionless chess piece in the hands of the emperor. And Bailey Rongs is. I really want to kick Bailey Fengming from here to there. He was originally the one who came to expose Bailey Fengming, but now he is watching Bailey Fengming take advantage of it. Had his heart been a little weak, I'm afraid he would have fainted on the spot. However, Emperor Yongchang was partial to Bailey Rongs and specially kept him in the imperial study for dinner. Bailey Fengming was already accustomed to this, so he knelt down and exited the imperial study room. Xiao Xian, who had been waiting outside the courtyard for a long time, hurriedly greeted him. "Your Highness, Lin Yi just sent news that the eldest prince had visited the third prince's residence before he entered the palace. To put it bluntly, what happened today cannot be blamed on the eldest prince who sells sliced cakes." Bailey Fengming was not surprised, and just walked in the direction of Fenji Palace calmly. "A single edge is a knife, and a double edge is a sword. Whether it is a knife or a sword, you have to try it to know." Xiao Xian. Can he say that he didn't understand it at all? In Fenji Palace, Queen Zhen 11 was at a loss when she saw Bailey Fengming entering the door. Seeing this, Lily hurriedly waved the other palace people to retreat. Empress Zhen 11 hurriedly waved and asked Bailey Fengming to come over and talk. "What is going on?" Bailey Fengming walked to Queen Zhen 11 and sat down, telling her everything about today. Queen Zhen 11 sneered and said, "The gap between the Hua family and Prince Rui's mansion is not just a day or two. With Xiao Qinjeo's mind and means, if he wanted to send Princess Rui on her way, how could she wait until Princess Rui was about to give birth, 3 babies? She has heard that Princess Rui has been very successful in raising pretty boys recently." Bailey Fengming said, "If everyone thought the same as the Queen, there would be no such thing." Queen Zhen 11 asked, "I heard that you went to the imperial study room. What does your father mean?" "Father also hopes to let Ayao refine the elixir of immortality after getting the blood of the rare and rare animals in the ice wilderness and snow field. Medicine, so my father must protect Ayao in this matter. Moreover, Even if there is no elixir, my father still hopes that Ayao will contain and monitor me. He will never give up Ayao's chess piece just because of a trivial matter. Such a simple truth, do the people who want to frame Xiao Qinjiao really not know it? Bailey Fengming lowered his eyes slightly. I'm afraid he has other motives. The most important thing now is to save Xiao Qinjiao first, as long as Xiao Qinjiao is released without charge. As long as Xiao Qinjiao returns safely, no matter what the person behind it is, all the previous efforts will be wasted. Empress Zhen 11 thought about it. Since your father is most concerned about immortality now, why don't we use a plan to let that merchant show up in the main city again? Your father will definitely find Xiao Qinjiao to trade just to be safe. As long as the emperor wants Xiao Qinjiao to come forward, he must give her a reason to leave Dali Temple in an upright manner. In this case, they just need to sit and wait for Xiao Qinjiao to return safely. When she thought of that extremely selfish man, Queen Zhen 11 felt why she was so blind back then. I only think about my own immortality and don't care about other people's feelings over the years. Thinking about the oath of love between the two of them back then, Queen Zhen 11 could even spit out her last night's meal. The Queen Mother will actually create problems for the father. Bailey Fengming did not expose the disgust written on Queen Zhengzi's face. If you want to live forever, you have to take some action. Queen Zhen 11 didn't feel distressed at all, but she was very happy. Old bastard, it's best if you don't kill him. But after thinking about it carefully, Queen Zhen 11 couldn't help but worry. Although this is the only way to cut through the mess quickly, it is also extremely risky for us. After all, the so-called merchants do not exist at all. Bailey Fengming smiled politely, his dark eyes showing no trace of panic. Without risk, how can there be stability? Empress Zhen 11 saw that Bailey Fengming already had a plan in mind, so she said no more. Bailey Fengming stayed in Fenji Palace for a while, then left the palace at night and headed to Heshuo County Prince's mansion. The more anxious you are, the more you need to seek stability amidst chaos, so as to minimize the so-called risks. Queen Zhen 11 looked at the door where Bailey Fengming disappeared, and murmured to herself, Lily, why do you think God doesn't want lovers to get married? Lily quickly comforted her, a friend in need is a friend indeed. The more you experience, the stronger the relationship between His Highness and the Crown Princess will be. Empress Zhen 11 nodded, and then asked Lily to get the phoenix hairpin she always wore. Lily looked at the golden phoenix hairpin in the tray. Queen, this is. A little later, you can take Feng Chai to Dali Temple in person. My daughter-in-law lives there. As a mother-in-law, I will naturally have to put more effort into going there. Doesn't the emperor like everything? If everyone obeys him, then she should be the one who obeys his wishes the most. But the queen, this phoenix hairpin is too precious. Lily was very anxious. This was the queen's first birthday after she became queen, and the emperor specially ordered it to be made. It must be valuable so that the people in Dali Temple can know my attitude. Queen Zhen 11 looked at Feng Chai lying quietly on the tray without any reluctance or nostalgia. Empress, you are deliberately trying to stir up trouble in the emperor's ears. Not only do you want to make a fuss, I also wish you could deafen him. That old has too many worries. Even if he really wants to save Fan Qinjiao, he still has to look forward and backward. If she doesn't push her, who knows when that scumbag will give little Qinjiao to her. Release it? It was almost the New Year's Eve, and she didn't want her precious daughter-in-law to spend New Year's Eve at Dali Temple. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 642. Chapter 642, Don't slap the face too quickly. Lily saw that the queen was determined, and when the night got darker, she left the palace in a carriage. In Dali Temple, the minister of Dali Temple had just sent Princess Heshuo and Lord Sun away. Before he could take a breath, he heard that another distinguished guest had arrived. The result was that Lily took out the queen's phoenix hairpin. The minister of Dali Temple. Suddenly I really want to resign and go back to the countryside to farm. In the front, the princess of Heshuo County threw 10,000 taels of silver, and in the back, the empress used the phoenix hairpin to put pressure. It was only now that the minister of Dali Temple realized that he had really arrested someone he shouldn't have. It was Fan Kinjao who was in the cell, but because of her, the minister of Dali Temple had to go into seclusion in the mountains and fields. A faint sound of footsteps suddenly sounded from far to near. Not long after, the footsteps stopped outside Fan Kinjao's cell. Sensing that he was being stared at, Fan Kinjao slowly opened his eyes. Under the dim light, he saw a person who had long been forgotten appear in front of him. Xiao Hongfei. Fan Kinjao was stunned for a moment and then returned to his original calm. In memory, Xiao Hongfei has always had smooth sailing in official circles. Coupled with his own talents, it was not beyond Fan Kinjao's expectation that he could step into the gate of Dali Temple in such a short period of time. Why, when you saw me here, you were so surprised that you were speechless. Xiao Hongfei stood outside the cell with his hands behind his hands, looking at Fan Kinjao who was sitting on the ground as if he was scorning the dust. He will never forget how much trouble he and his mother suffered at the hands of Fan Kinjao. So when he learned that Fan Kinjao was sent to Dali Temple, his excited blood boiled. I just didn't expect you to appear in front of me again. It's normal to be a little surprised. Fan Kinjao looked at Xiao Hongfei calmly, his dark eyes showing a peaceful tranquility under the dim candle light. What do you mean? If you can't beat me, just take a detour. Even a dog understands such a simple truth. I didn't expect you didn't understand it. You. Xiao Hongfei glared at Fan Kinjao, all his complacency disappeared. Fan Kinjao is not afraid of Xiao Hongfei's glare. He came here just to see her laugh. Since he has no good intentions, why should she show mercy? After all, Xiao Hongfei is a person who has been in officialdom for a long time, and he quickly calmed down. As expected of the crown princess, she is courageous, but the crown princess seems to have forgotten that now you are dependent on someone else. Xiao is not talented, it is this young man from Dali Temple. Sir, the crown princess happened to be in my hands. If she begged me sincerely, I might be more generous because of my past kindness. Fan Kinjao really didn't expect that Xiao Hongfei would be promoted so quickly. The Shaoqing of Dali Temple is second only to the minister of Dali Temple. To put it bluntly, he is the second in command of Dali Temple. But in this case, it is completely innocuous to Fan Kinjao. If you really have a way to make me suffer, you won't stand here wasting time. Xiao Hongfei, no matter how much you think of yourself, but in my eyes, you have never been the same as a gentleman. Hearing this, Xiao Hongfei's expression changed. Fan Kinjao, do you really think I dare not touch you? Fan Kinjao smiled lightly, of course. Fan Kinjao has never thought about the unrealistic idea of repaying evil with kindness. Although Xiao Hongfei and Mrs. Xiao deserved their punishment, she did not show mercy. She could still imagine how Xiao Hongfei wanted to kill her now. But Xiao Hongfei stood outside the cell from beginning to end, not even intending to open the cell. Look at the empty space behind him again. Either he can't touch her, or he doesn't dare to touch her. Xiao Hongfei is here to add insult to injury, so no matter how angry he is, he will never fall out with Fan Kinjao. And he didn't believe that Fan Kinjao really had no weaknesses. You're right. I really can't let you do anything, but don't be too happy too early. Do you understand the reason why everyone is pushing back the wall? Even if you can really leave Dali Temple safely this time, the powerful people in the main city will also avoid you and drive you away like a fly. Xiao Hongfei looked at Fan Kinjao coldly, with disgust mixed with strong malice in his eyes. This kind of taste has been experienced by him personally. Thinking back to the time when the Hua family kicked him out, the powerful people who were polite to him one second turned a blind eye to him the next. That kind of indifference that turned their backs and refused to recognize anyone could still clearly surface in his mind even now. mind. At that time, he made up his mind to let Fan Kinjao experience this feeling. Now, he finally got his wish. Xiao Hongfei's eyes turned red with excitement when he thought that Fan Kinjao was about to become a street rat in front of the powerful people in the main city. Fan Kinjao slowly closed his eyes again under Xiao Hongfei's gaze. With this kind of person, it is really a waste of time to say another word. Facing Fan Kinjao's silence and avoidance, Xiao Hongfei became even more convinced that he was right. Sure enough, no one cares about face. It's just a pity that Fan Kinjao will soon be completely infamous in the main city. Shouting behind him, the prison chief's voice suddenly sounded. Xiao Hongfei did not turn around, but waved with great style, say. The jailer hurriedly came over and said, "The 8th prince sent someone to deliver a food basket just now. She said that she was worried about the food in Dali Temple, so she specially prepared dinner for the prince." As soon as he finished speaking, the jailer took the initiative to open the food basket in his hand. Almost instantly, the aroma of the food filled the prison. Under the flickering candle light, you can see the exquisiteness of the food in the food basket, and even the jailer can't help but swallow his saliva. Xiao Hongfei tensed up his whole body in disbelief, and kept telling himself that he had seen it wrong, that he had seen it wrong. But no matter how much he denied it in his heart, the food basket in the prisoner's hand was clearly in front of him. Especially the exquisite dishes in the food basket were like slaps, invisibly slapped on Xiao Hongfei's face again and again. It's really a slap in the face, so don't come too fast. In a moment of rage, Xiao Hongfei slapped the food basket in the prisoner's hand and knocked it to the ground. Exquisite food, together with steaming rice, was scattered throughout the prison. The jailer was startled, shouting, "What are you?" Xiao Hongfei smiled coldly, "Go and give a message to the person sent by the 8th prince concubine, saying that the crown princess has a tricky taste and can't get used to the food sent by the 8th prince concubine. She also thinks that the food is too bland, so she all throw it on the ground." Such a clear way to sow discord, unless a fool can't hear it. The jailer did not dare to offend the second in command of Dali Temple, so he quickly turned around and walked out. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 643. Chapter 643. Isn't Xiao Hongfei poisonous? Xiao Hongfei saw that Fan Kinjao kept his eyes closed and sneered, "Why, you don't dare to face the fact that you are disliked by thousands of people." Hearing this, Fan Kinjao did not open his eyes, but said softly, "Seeing you makes me sick." Xiao Hongfei. Why can this woman still have such a tough mouth at this time? Fan Kinjao, don't forget, the prince personally sent you here today. None of the dignitaries in the main city will be defeated by the wind. I want to see how long you can keep your stubbornness. Xiao Hongfei had no intention of leaving, and just looked at Fan Kinjao with a sneer. In his opinion, Fan Kinjao's current glory is all because she became the princess. And only now did he realize that Fan Kinjao didn't marry him in the first place because he wanted to climb a high tree. Such a shameless woman should get the retribution she deserves. Half an hour later, the jailer came over with sweat on his face. Hearing the sound of footsteps, Xiao Hongfei knew that what he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Speak carefully and carefully, so that the crown princess will know clearly how the 8th prince and princess responded. This is a bit hard to say. Xiao Hongfei waited for a long time, but did not see a reply from the jailer. He even sneered and said, "Tell the truth." The jailer looked at Xiao Hongfei, who had his back turned to him, and then at the crown princess, who had her eyes closed and was concentrating. He gritted his teeth and said, "The 8th princess has just arrived at Dali Temple in person, but she was afraid of disturbing the crown princess's rest, and did not come in to visit, but the 8th prince concubine said that it doesn't matter if the crown princess is not used to eating, just ask someone to tell her what she wants to eat in the future, and the 8th prince concubine will do everything possible to make the crown princess eat well. As the jailer spoke, he raised another food basket in his hand. Open it, and it is filled with exquisite dishes. Because the dishes in the basket just now were all on the lighter side, the 8th prince really made some improvements this time, replacing all the mild dishes with spicy ones. Xiao Hongfei lowered his head stiffly, looking at the stuffed food basket, his fists clenched. If he was puzzled just now, the 8th prince's concubine was fawning over Fan Qinjiao. So now, it is no exaggeration to say that I am shocked. Xiao Hongfei couldn't understand, why? Why would the 8th prince and concubine accommodate Fan Qinjiao without any bottom line? Doesn't the 8th prince and concubine know that Fan Qinjiao is now in jail? Of course the 8th prince and concubine knew this. Otherwise, why would she be rolling up her arms and sleeves and holding a large spoon in the middle of the night? But in the eyes of the 8th prince, Fan Qinjiao had experienced great storms. What kind of obstacles have you not encountered? What kind of fire pit have you not jumped over? To put it bluntly, the so-called imprisonment is not a big deal in the eyes of the 8th prince, because she fully believes that with Fan Qinjiao's strength, he can definitely return home safely. Fan Qinjiao couldn't help but slightly raise the corners of his lips. Even with his eyes closed, he could still think of the scene when the 8th prince concubine was cooking. The same smile fell in Xiao Hongfei's eyes, it was clearly sarcasm and ridicule. Grabbed the food basket, Xiao Hongfei threw it to the ground again without even thinking about it. I really don't know if I haven't come here, but I'm shocked when I come here. Isn't it true that Dali Temple is the most rigorous and just place in our main city? Why did I see someone deliberately mistreating me as soon as I entered the door? This voice. Fan Qinjiao opened his eyes and saw Sun Kentong walking towards him. It's just that Sun Kentong was not walking fast at this moment, because she was also supporting a woman with a bulging belly. When Fan Qinjiao saw Han Jingchen's figure clearly again, his heart was already sore. It was quite tiring for both of them. Xiao Hongfei certainly knew Sun Kentong and Han Jingchen. One is the daughter of Sun Kuyu, the salt transport secretary of the imperial city. One is the current concubine of the 6th prince. Even though they are two women, they are not ones he can mess with in terms of status or background. So in the face of Sun Kentong's question just now, Xiao Hongfei had to explain, I'm afraid Miss Sun has misunderstood. Dali Temple has always strictly investigated prisoners. If Sun Kongtong hadn't been well educated, he would have really slapped her and said, you. Who among the people in the main city doesn't know that Princess Rui's death is suspicious? Even the so-called witness's testimony was hesitant. This matter even the minister of Dali Temple has not made up his mind. You are the one who said that the crown princess is a prisoner. Xiao Hongfei's face turned green after being scolded. How can this woman be so vulgar? Han Jingchen took Sun Kentong's hand and said, don't talk like that. This is the young minister of Dali Temple. What is Shaoqing? The official title is second only to the minister of Dali Temple. Oh, to put it bluntly, he's just a perennial old man. Xiao Hongfei's face was no longer green. Xiao Hongfei's face turned completely green. Sun Kongtong didn't bother to look at Xiao Hongfei's little face, and turned to look at the jailer aside. When I came, I saw the 8th prince concubine still waiting outside. Go tell the 8th prince concubine the truth, and say that what happened today is all your fault. The young minister of Dali Temple has a convulsion, which has nothing to do with the princess. Zhu Cheng glanced at Xiao Hongfei with some embarrassment, but Han Jingchen's face darkened when he saw this. No matter why the young minister of Dali Temple knocked over the food basket sent by the 8th prince, if this matter gets serious, it will not be good for Dali Temple's face. Or, Dali Temple itself, is it just a place where officials protect each other and is in decay? This hat is too big. The jailer was just a small 5th grade official, but he didn't dare to pick him up and hurriedly walked out of the prison. Xiao Hongfei really didn't expect that the 6th prince and the Miss Sun family would come together at the drop of a hat. Thinking about his rashness just now, he just wanted to talk about it. But Sun Kentang didn't want to listen to his nonsense at all. Does the second son of Dali Temple still want to stop us from visiting? Xiao Hongfei. Who do you think is the second child? It's rare for us to come here. I would like to ask the young minister of Dali Temple to move away for a moment. We want to say a few words to the Crown Princess. Han Jingchen was still very polite, but this kind of superior politeness was even more heartbreaking. Xiao Hongfei squeezed the hands in his sleeves, trying his best to regain some face for himself. The 6th prince's concubine is serious. The 6th prince's status is noble, and the ministers must be accommodating. Looking at the entire court, who doesn't know that the 6th prince is the most powerless? Han Jingchen sneered in his heart. No matter how bad her husband is, he is still a prince. How can he allow a courtier to ridicule her? When he was about to retaliate, he was directly interrupted by Sun Kentang. I asked you why you are so ink. Didn't you see that the 6th prince's concubine still has a bulging belly? If something happens to the 6th prince's concubine in Dali Temple, you have to take full responsibility. The fists in Xiao Hongfei's sleeves clenched loudly. He has never seen such blackmail. But what Sun Kongtong said was right. If something really happened to the 6th prince and his concubine, he would not be able to escape the blame. Thinking about this, Xiao Hongfei pretended to be generous and made a gesture of invitation, and then walked out the door. Sun Kentang is really disgusted. He is obviously a villain. Why is he pretending to be a big-tailed wolf here? I would say you two were lucky not to marry him in the first place, but speaking of it, Xiao Hongfei is also interesting. First he fell in love with Qinjiao, and then Qinjiao became the princess, and then he fell in love with Jing Chen. Unexpectedly, Jing Chen has become the 6th prince's concubine again, so maybe Xiao Hongfei is poisonous. It was Xiao Hongfei who was about to walk out of the door. He tripped on the steps and almost fell to the ground. The jailer was so frightened that he quickly helped him. Young master, be careful. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 644. Chapter 644. The conspiracy behind the death of Princess Rui. With Xiao Hongfei's departure, the prison finally returned to quiet. Han Jingchen looked at Fan Qinjiao, who was in the cell not far away. Before he could speak, tears started flowing out. Fan Qinjiao smiled and said, I'm doing well, why are you crying? With the support of Sun Kentang, Han Jingchen walked outside the cell door and looked at Fan Qinjiao inside through the arm-thick iron bars. If you are really good, why are you sitting here? Fan Qinjiao smiled slightly and said, it's only because I'm good that I sit here. Han Jingchen knew that he could not defeat Fan Qinjiao, so he could only sigh. Sun Kentang took the opportunity to squat down and lowered his voice and said, Qinjiao, don't worry. Although the emperor doesn't have a clear attitude yet, my father has said it, so it may not be a bad thing. Fan Qinjiao did not expect that this incident would alarm even Mr. Sun. However, as Sun Kongtong said, the emperor's current attitude is ambiguous. It seems to be leaving her alone, but in fact it can also be regarded as a kind of favoritism towards her. After all, as long as the emperor is still concerned about this matter, those who want to add fuel to the flames will not be able to stir up trouble. It seems that Bailey Fengming has already taken some action. Qinjiao, do you think it was no coincidence that we met Princess Rui that day? After the accident, Han Jingchen always felt that something was wrong. Princess Rui had always lived in the main city, but she had never been with Fan Qinjiao. There was no intersection between them, but they finally bumped into each other once, and something happened. Sun Kentang frowned. Are you saying that Princess Rui appeared on purpose and then framed Kinjao? Han Jingchen nodded, then shook his head. Logically speaking, it is reasonable for Princess Rui to hate Fan Kinjao. But if Princess Rui really wanted revenge, she should have taken action long ago. How could she wait so long? If Princess Rui did not commit suicide but was killed, everything would make sense. Fan Kinjao suddenly spoke, with a tone of affirmation rather than doubt. Hearing these words, Han Jingchen felt his limbs getting cold. Princess Rui committed suicide. This incident made her want revenge. But if Princess Rui was killed, then someone wanted to kill Fan Kinjao. Kinjao, do you know something? Han Jingchen looked at Fan Kinjao. Based on her understanding of Fan Kinjao has never been a person who likes to talk big. Fan Kinjao looked at Han Jingchen and nodded gently. Today when she was at the door of Hua's house, she personally inspected Princess Rui's body, so she was sure of it. There is indeed some residual medicine in Princess Rui's throat, but as far as Fan Kinjao knows, all poisons are soluble in an instant, so that they can be absorbed by the body faster, causing death. On the other hand, the poison taken by Princess Rui was not completely dissolved. This can only mean that Princess Rui died before taking the medicine. The most important point is that there is a dent in Princess Rui's neck. Because there are no bruises on Princess Rui's neck, it is normal for others to ignore it. Even the dent is not very obvious. If you don't observe it carefully, it will be impossible to find it. Han Jingchen's heart almost jumped out of his chest when he heard this. So, what do these prove? Fan Kinjao curled his lips coldly. It proves that the person who killed Princess Rui was careful enough. Han Jingchen squeezed the handkerchief in his hand and said, there are so many killers in the main city. It's not easy to find them. As far as she knew, when the princes of the past dynasties were fighting for power, they would secretly train killers, dead pools, who specialized in doing things that were shady. Fan Kinjao naturally understands this truth. But there are not many people who can kill people and know how to poison and erase traces. During his imprisonment, Fan Kinjao kept thinking about everyone he met in his previous life. But she found that even if she thought about it countless times, she could not find such a person. If it is what you said, then this incident is basically directed at you, but what is the purpose of those people doing this? Is it just to make you? Han Jingchen did not say the word death at the end. Because she was afraid. It's even hard to imagine. Don't worry, it won't happen. Fan Kinjao comforted Han Jingchen with a smile, fearing that she would frighten the baby in her belly. Han Jingchen knew that Fan Kinjao had always been a person with rules and regulations, and knew that he could not help much, so he didn't say anything more, but he just hoped in his heart that everything would be safe this time. Sun Kentung's heart was beating loudly when he heard this. Otherwise, we won't fight. Everything happening now is because of the throne. Wouldn't it be better if we stopped fighting for it? Hearing this, Fan Kinjao and Han Jingchen laughed helplessly. Now that the factions of each prince have become clear, giving up at this time will force the staff behind them into a dead end. After all, no prince will reuse those who follow him halfway. Moreover, the princes seemed to be in peace on the surface, but in fact things were turbulent behind the scenes. If you really wait for other princes to take the throne, your death will only be worse by then. Fan Kinjao actually knew what Han Jingchen was thinking. But what others don't know is how brutal Bailey Rongs was when he came to power. Those ministers who once stood behind other princes, eventually died without their bodies intact. In this life, it is impossible for Fan Kinjao to watch everything repeat the same mistakes. The best revenge for Bailey Rongs is to keep him under the imperial power forever. As the night grew darker, Fan Kinjao didn't want Han Jingchen and Sun Kongtong to follow her with fear, so she carefully warned them not to go out recently, and then watched them leave. In the damp and gloomy cell, Fan Kinjao leaned against the cold wall with complicated emotions. She had actually known for a long time that Princess Rui's death was not that simple. But if you want to get rid of her through this, it would be a bit ridiculous. She is the crown princess appointed by the emperor. Just because of this ambiguous method, trying to persuade the emperor to give up her as a chess piece is simply out of the blue. But such a simple truth, doesn't the person who framed her understand it? Or rather, there is something else fundamentally wrong with this matter. But what are those people trying to do? At this time, Bailey Fengming had already thought of a way to save her. According to Bailey Fengming's calculation, as long as the merchant who had come to the main city was released, there was no need for him to take action again. The emperor, who was anxious to live forever, would find a way to clear her suspicions. After all, the emperor still counted on her to identify the authenticity of rare and exotic animals. In this way, Bailey Fengming just took one step and easily resolved the current predicament. As for the so-called crime of murder, wrong. Fan Qingjiao's heart trembled, and he finally understood what was wrong. After figuring everything out, Fan Qingjiao broke out in a cold sweat. Because this matter was not just about her at all, it was also about Bailey Fengming. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinqi. Chapter 645. Chapter 645. Who dares to touch the crown princess? Thinking about something is like seeing a doctor. Once you get the right point, everything else will fall into place. However, how to prescribe the medicine to cure the disease requires careful consideration. After thinking through everything, Fan Qingjiao calmed down. The whole thing did happen strangely, but fortunately she didn't let others lead her a few steps. As long as she thought about how to take the next step, it was not a dead end. And all she has to do now is wait. Time passes by invisibly, bit by bit. In the prison, other prisoners were snoring one after another, and various smells filled the prison. I don't know how long it took, but a figure suddenly flew in from the window and landed outside Fan Qingjiao's cell. Fan Qingjiao looked at the person coming, and then at the window that was as tall as a person, still a little surprised. That window is only a few inches wide, so it is impossible for an adult or even a child to get in. Lin Yi looked at Fan Qingjiao, who was silent, and thought he was frightened. At the end of the day, it's just a teenage girl who was suddenly sent to prison. How could she be scared? So on the way here, Lin Yi had already thought about comforting the princess. After all, she was his future mistress, and it was not easy for a woman to do this. Princess, there is no need to panic. I practiced bone shrinking kung fu when I was a child, so I am so high. Where is Bailey Fengming going now? Lin Yi was stunned. Faced with Fan Qingjiao's direct attack, he was obviously unable to react. Fan Qingjiao paused and then said, "If I guess correctly, Bailey Fengming's next step is to let the merchants return to the main city. In this way, the emperor will find a way to get what he wants as soon as possible. Let me be acquitted. After all, only in this way can I follow Bailey Fengming to trade with merchants and identify the authenticity and efficacy of the corpse." Lin Yi's eyes widened unconsciously, and he nodded after a while. That is indeed the case, so His Highness specially asked his subordinates to send a message to the crown princess to calm down. If nothing happens, the crown princess will be here in 3 days, then you can walk out of here safely. Fan Qingjiao frowned. So fast? According to her understanding of Bailey Fengming should delay further. First, let out the news bit by bit that the merchants were about to arrive in the main city, in order to stimulate the impatient emperor, and take the opportunity to let everyone see clearly how much the emperor valued her, so that those who were still lucky enough would not dare to deal with her easily. She took action. His Highness said, "There is still a tough battle ahead, so hurry up and rescue the crown princess, so that you can recharge your batteries." Fan Qingjiao. Oh, it turns out that black-hearted fox has already guessed it. Thinking like this, Fan Qingjiao curled his lips unconsciously. Lin Yi looked at the smile hanging on the corners of Fan Qingjiao's lips. He couldn't be said to be surprised, he could only be said to be shocked. Normally speaking, if a girl is imprisoned in a place like this, she would be fine if she doesn't cry. The crown princess can still laugh. How did you laugh? Fan Qingjiao felt much calmer when he saw that Bailey Fengming was well understood. Lin Yuju. Not calm anymore. Originally, he was well prepared to comfort the crown princess, but it turned out that they were able to get in faster than him, so that from entering the prison to leaving Dali Temple, it took him less than a stick of incense. Is this the attitude a girl should have when encountering danger? This is a pure man. Lin Yi's depression lasted until he arrived at the Heshuo County Prince's mansion. Bailey Fengming, who had just finished talking to Prince Heshuo and Hua Yaoding, walked out of the back door in the darkness. Seeing Lin Yi's depressed look, he was not surprised. 3 days, Yao thinks it's too soon, Lin Yi said. Your Highness, can you please stop doing this? I know you and the Crown Princess are smart, but you must always leave a way for ordinary people like us to survive. Lin Yi looked almost miserable and repeated Fan Qingjiao's words. The Crown Princess also said that it turns out that His Highness also understands that chance is inevitable. It was Bailey Fengming who was sitting in the carriage and smiled when he heard this. Being able to say such words proves that she has thought of what he has thought of. Since this is the case, there is nothing to worry about. Let's go. Bailey Fengming rarely picked up the book in the corner, but leaned on the soft couch and closed his eyes to rest. Although there are still 3 days, if he wants to take one step at a time, he cannot relax every day. When Bailey Fengming returned to the East Palace, it was already Zishi. As a result, the next day, it was still dark, so I got up and went to Dali Temple again. The minister of Dali Temple was called to the third prince's residence at midnight yesterday, but the ink was not released until dawn. The minister of Dali Temple, who had dark circles under his eyes, was about to go back and catch up on some sleep, but as soon as he entered the door, he saw His Highness the Crown Prince sitting upright. Just now the third prince has been sent away, and here comes the Crown Prince. Just ask who can withstand this? The minister of Dali Temple really had a headache. He smiled and stepped forward to say hello. Wei Chen knows that His Highness the Crown Prince is here for the Crown Princess's case. We will handle this matter impartially. How can His Highness the Prince have such a distinguished status in Dali Temple? Is this such a yin-filled place so tiring and tiring? The implication is, Your Highness, if you have nothing to do, just leave. In the past, Bailey Fengming would not have argued with him in order to restrain his anger. But now that he has the Emperor's permission, Bailey Fengming cannot give in. I accept the kindness of the Dali Temple minister. However, I have the Emperor's mandate, and I cannot let my father down. The minister of Dali Temple. My head hurts even more. With the prince coming, it's the Emperor's order. Looking at the prince sitting there like a giant Buddha, the minister of Dali Temple was still sleeping, so he could only send a message to the people below to investigate and handle the case. As soon as these words spread, the whole Dali Temple was boiling. Some say that the prince is upright, and some say that the prince actually feels sorry for the princess. Otherwise, why would he go to a gloomy place like Dali Temple instead of pampering himself in the East Palace? The one who can't sit still the most is Xiao Hongfei. The reason why Xiao Hongfei dared to be so arrogant in the prison yesterday was because he heard that the prince took the initiative to find people from Dali Temple and arrested Fan Qingjiao. Xiao Hongfei had already seen this kind of profit-making marriage, so from the moment Fan Qingjiao was sent in, Xiao Hongfei concluded that Fan Qingjiao had been abandoned by the prince. As a result, the prince is now sitting alone in Dali Temple for Fan Qingjiao. Xiao Hongfei can vomit 2 pounds of blood just thinking about it. The whole day, Dali Temple was busy reviewing the case from top to bottom. However, the man next to Princess Rui insisted that Fan Qingjiao killed Princess Rui. Even if there was no conclusive evidence, Fan Qinjiao could not be released temporarily due to the witness's testimony. Normally, it would be Fan Qinjiao's turn to be tortured to extract a confession. But now His Highness the Crown Prince is sitting there in plain sight. Although he has not said a word to protect the Crown Princess in the whole process, under the eyes of the Crown Prince, who would dare to torture the Crown Princess? Even Xiao Hongfei, who hated Fan Qinjiao so much in his heart, had to keep his head down. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 646. Chapter 646. I felt a thunder split open the Tianling cap. The prince was in Dali Temple, and the place he was sitting on was called a stable one. It can be said that all the people in Dali Temple have been forced to shut themselves up. However, the minister of Dali Temple was indifferent. Originally, he didn't want to take sides, but since the third prince had told him, even if he just wanted to ignore the third prince's side, he still had to make a show of putting a torture device on the princess. But now, under the gaze of the prince, these so-called it can be said that the worries are completely unnecessary. The case is now being tried by the prince on the order of the emperor. Whether the princess should be punished or not is the final decision of the prince. If you, the third prince, are not convinced, just go to the prince directly. Thinking like this, the minister of Dali Temple became even more calm and composed. There is even a kind of prayer that the case is not settled and the prince does not want to go. But in front of him, Bailey Fengming was not surprised that the minister of Dali Temple gave up his struggle completely. Since the third emperor brother has doubts about the friendship between him and Ayao, he will definitely do something secretly. Although my father is already considering this matter, how to acquit Ayao, but now that he is in Dali Temple after all, he deserves to be tortured, and his father will never pursue him for such a trivial matter. So Bailey Fengming knew very well that only by sitting here could he truly protect Ayao. Xiao Hongfei also got the explanation from the third prince. He originally planned to torture Fan Qinjiao with the Dali Temple minister the next day, but the rhythm was disrupted because of the arrival of the prince. Just for this kind of thing, Dali Temple minister can pretend to be stupid, but Xiao Hongfei cannot. Later, Xiao Hongfei went to the third prince's residence in person. When Bailey Rongs heard about this, he was so angry that he kicked Xiao Hongfei directly. Even if the prince pretended to be perfect in front of his father that day, he still doubted the eldest prince's words. And if you want to test whether the relationship between the prince and Fan Qinjiao is based on interests or affection, torture is the quickest way. In the end, he was ready to bear witness. But told him that not only did they not take action, but they also had no way to take action? What's the use of this waste like you? Bailey Rongs didn't kick Xiao Hongfei to death, all because he was short of people around him. Xiao Hongfei was kicked until his stomach turned blue, but he could only hope that His Highness the Crown Prince would leave soon. And Bailey Fengming sat in Dali Temple for 2 days. For example, the people were paying attention to the progress of the princess murder case, and they didn't even notice that there was an extra guest in the main city. By the time the soldiers guarding the city reacted and reported the matter, it was already 3 days later. And that guest was the merchant who had arrived in the main city. After receiving the news, Emperor Yongchang couldn't sit still. He quickly transferred a death row prisoner from the Tianlao, charged him with the death of Princess Rui, and then sent him to Dali Temple in exchange for Fan Qinjiao's release from prison. As for Xiao Hongfei, he finally sent the prince away, and was thinking about finding an opportunity to torture Fan Qinjiao, when he was told that the real murderer had been found and the prince was acquitted. Xiao Hongfei. I felt a thunder split open the Tianling cover. The whole person is torn apart. Since Emperor Xiaochang wanted to find someone to blame, he naturally had to do it flawlessly. Even Xiao Hongfei, who was bent on finding trouble, could not find any doubts after reviewing the confessions and files with the minister of Dali Temple. With no choice but to do so, Xiao Hongfei could only watch helplessly as the jailer went to the prison to release him. On the contrary, the minister of Dali Temple was in high spirits, as if he had thrown away a hot potato. When Fan Qinjiao was released from prison, the Hua family had already been waiting outside Dali Temple. As soon as Hua Yaoding saw Fan Qinjiao, he walked over quickly and pulled him over from the jailer's hands. "How are you? Do you feel any discomfort?" Fan Qinjiao shook his head. "Excuse me. Let's take a trip." Hua Yaoding heard Fan Qinjiao's smooth and soft voice, and then he breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Silly boy, you should." Tao Yuxian held Fan Qinjiao's cold little hand and said, "Get in the car quickly. If you have anything to say, let's go back and talk." Of course Hua Yaoding knew that Dali Temple was not a place to talk, so he waved the carriage over. After getting on the carriage, Fan Qinjiao asked, "Did you hear any news over there?" Tao Yuxian patted her hand and said, "Don't worry, your aunties are watching over there, everything will be fine." Fan Qinjiao nodded, "As long as his mother is safe there. While your grandmother and I came to pick you up, the prince had already gone to the restaurant on the emperor's order to meet with the merchant. The time for the transaction should be set soon. You have to be prepared." Hua Yaoding's words were very obscure, but Fan Qinjiao couldn't understand them. Because both her and her grandfather and grandmother knew very well that the so-called merchants were fake. "But you don't need to worry too much. I have already made an agreement with Prince Heshuo. After you and the prince make a deal with the merchant, I will find someone to the body of the so-called rare beast from your hands. In this way, come, let this matter be settled." Hua Yaoding spent the whole night discussing at the Heshuo County Prince's mansion that day, and still felt that this method was the safest. Tao Yuxian frowned and said, "The emperor is already suspicious, wouldn't he suspect that it was just a show? The emperor has doubted many things in his life. As long as the emperor is not allowed to obtain evidence, doubts will always be just doubts. This method is risky, but it is also the best way to get everyone out at the moment." Tao Yuxian nodded, and now it seemed that this was all he could do. Half an hour later, when Fan Qinjiao arrived at the western suburbs mansion, Nanny Su and others were already waiting at the door. Seeing the young lady get off the carriage, Grandma Su's distressed eyes turned red. "In just a few days, people have become so thin." Tao Yuxian didn't know when the emperor would send someone. He couldn't really let people enter the palace with dirt all over their bodies, otherwise they would definitely be said by interested people that the Hua family was deliberately pretending to be pitiful to gain sympathy. Everyone else at the gate of the house was ordered to disperse, and Nanny Su was ordered to take Fan Qinjiao back to the courtyard first. After Fan Qinjiao returned to the yard, he was directly pressed into the bathtub by Aunt Su. After taking a comfortable bath, Ningguan walked in with sweet-scented osman, thus porridge that had been boiled until soft and glutinous. Fan Qinjiao got dressed, walked to the table, sat down, and ate a big bowlful. After Ningguan sent the bowl out, Fan Qinjiao called Lang Yan and asked, "How about the person who showed you?" "Don't worry, miss, this person has been at home these days. When I came back in the morning, he was still sleeping, and now Ningtian is watching." Fan Qinjiao nodded. Princess Rui's case was closed, but the matter had not really passed. That person may be useless to others, but to her, it is the key to her bite back. The curtain was lifted, and Lin Yi entered the door under the guidance of Ning Han. "His Royal Highness asked the Crown Princess to prepare, and he will personally take the Crown Princess to trade with merchants in an hour." Fan Qinjiao was about to say that he knew it, but he saw the heavy curtain being lifted up again. Immediately afterwards, Xiaoxian came in with wounds all over his body. "Something happened over there, Your Highness." End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 647. Chapter 647 Turning Against Guests. Xiaoxian was seriously injured and blood was oozing from his feet when he walked. Ning'an was so frightened that she covered her mouth and almost screamed. "What happened?" Fan Qinjiao asked, while someone helped Xiaoxian onto the soft couch and carefully inspected Xiaoxuan's injuries. Xiaoxian endured the pain of scratching the wound when he took off his clothes, and gritted his teeth and said, "I went to the restaurant with His Highness today, but when I was pretending to negotiate with the merchants, I was attacked. Now the merchants have been killed, and your highness is still. I was detained in a restaurant. The person who came here was very skilled in martial arts and I didn't know the details, but he said that he was a friend of the crown princess and asked me to come back to deliver a message to the crown princess," Xiaoxian said as he took out a blood-stained letter from his arms. Fan Qinjiao took advantage of Ning'an to get the medicine box and quickly opened the letter. The next second, it became calm. "Jinai Kingdom, Regent. It is reasonable and unexpected." Xiaoxian was shocked. Why did the regent of Jinai do this? Lin Yi was shocked. "You, a young master from the East Palace, can't beat a pampered prince." Xiaoxian. He also feels it's a shame, but what should he do if he just can't beat him? "I once dealt with the regent of the Jinai Kingdom. This man claimed to have the carcasses of rare animals in the ice wilderness. This man was too unpredictable and scheming. I did not agree to have an in-depth discussion with him." Xiaoxian thought about it, so this time the regent of Jinai Kingdom wants to. Fan Qinjiao narrowed his eyes slightly. "Let's buy and sell by force." Lin Yi suggested, "No matter what the reason is, should we go to the restaurant immediately?" Fan Qinjiao said, "No. The regent of Jinai Kingdom is indeed very skilled in martial arts, but Bailey Fengming's martial arts is not weak either. If it is really a fight between two tigers, it is not easy to decide who will lose and who will win. The regent of Jinai Kingdom seems to be coming in force, but in fact he does not dare to really move Bailey Fengming in the territory of Ziliang. Even if Bailey Fengming is not taken seriously by the emperor, he is still the crown prince of Ziliang, unless the regent of Jinai wants to break up with Ziliang. Moreover, once they really go now, things will become a big deal. By then, the regent of Jinai Kingdom would only say that he wanted to have tea with Bailey Fengming, and it would be Bailey Fengming who would make a fuss about it." Lin Yi and Xiaoxian listened to Fan Qinjiao's analysis and felt that their heads had grown in vain. Otherwise, why can't they think of things that the princess can think of? Xiaoxian looked at Lin Yi. "With your IQ, it's okay that you don't understand." Lin Yi looked at Xiaoxian. "Those who cannot even defeat a prince have no right to speak." Xiaoxian. Fan Qinjiao said he won't go, so he really won't go. Because she was sure that the regent of Jinai Kingdom would not touch Bailey Fengming. In a blink of an eye, an hour passed. Manager Sun, who had been standing by the window, saw that the crown princess of Ziliang had not come for a long time, so he turned around and walked to the regent of Jinai Kingdom to report. "Your Majesty, an hour has passed. If the princess of Ziliang wanted to come, she would have arrived long ago." She did not lower her voice when she said these words. Bailey Fengming, who was sitting opposite, could easily hear them all. The regent of Jinai Kingdom waved his hand and signaled Manager Sun to go out first. As the door of the restaurant room was closed, the room fell into silence. Bailey Fengming and the regent sat face to face, one wearing a green robe and the other wearing a white robe, each with its own merits but equally divided. At this moment, the murdered merchant was lying next to the two of them. Blood slowly flowed down the gradually cold body, staining the soles of their shoes red. The man died extremely miserably. All the joints on his body were broken, and his neck was twisted into a weird arc, hanging on his shoulders. On his blue face, his eyes popped out of his sockets. Such misery shows the ruthlessness of the murderer. It was so terrifying that it was enough to see the calmness of those sitting aside. The regent of the Jinai Kingdom deliberately left the body behind just to see the reaction of the Ziliang prince. Unexpectedly, it turned out to be much more calm and composed than he expected. Sure enough, the Prince of Ziliang is much more powerful than the rumors say. I didn't expect that the Crown Princess of Ziliang did not come to the appointment. It was a waste of my patience in waiting. After all, the Crown Princess of Ziliang was very punctual in coming to the appointment with me last time Regent of Janai Kingdom. He slowly raised his hand to light the small stove in front of him, as if he didn't know how ambiguous and suspicious his words were. Bailey Fengming smiled faintly. Yao has always been polite and courteous when facing strangers. The Regent of Janai Kingdom paused for a moment as he picked up the teapot, but then he smiled and said, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince of Ziliang has a close relationship with the Crown Princess. These words are clearly threatening Bailey Fengming. He can report the matter to the Ziliang Emperor anytime and anywhere. Whether it was intimate or not, the Regent of Janai Kingdom should have known when he saved the life of the Regent of Janai Kingdom. These words are also full of threats. After all, the Regent of Janai State sneaked into Ziliang privately. Whatever the reason, infiltration is enough to break the alliance treaty. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince of Ziliang is deliberately showing off his feelings for the Crown Princess in front of me. It's not about showing off, it's just a matter of fact. In the room, the Regent of the Janai Kingdom was chatting and laughing happily, and the phoenixes were singing in a calm manner. Outside the house, Manager Sun, who was guarding the door, was breaking out in a cold sweat just listening to it. It can be said that it is a master's game. Every frown and every smile is full of murderous intent. Gilug gilug, gilug gilug. The tea is already boiling on the stove. The Regent of Janai State poured 2 cups of tea in a leisurely manner, and pushed 1 cup in front of Bailey Fengming very generously. Actually, I am here today to help the Prince of Ziliang. Bailey Fengming's eyes were indifferent and he didn't answer anything. I learned that the Crown Princess of Ziliang was imprisoned. The Crown Prince of Ziliang was eager to save her, so he came up with the idea of a merchant. Therefore, I also want to get involved. Why does the Regent of Janai think so? Just because I like the Crown Princess of Ziliang. These words are really said without any disguise. As the words fell, the Regent of Janai Kingdom had been looking at Bailey Fengming. However, there was no expression on Bailey Fengming's face, as if the person the Regent of the Janai Kingdom was talking about had nothing to do with him. I don't see the sincerity of the Regent of the Janai Kingdom. Bailey Fengming said and glanced at the already cold merchant not far away. Seeing this, the Regent of Janai Kingdom curled his lips, half smiling but not smiling. If this were not the case, how could the Prince of Ziliang agree to let me join the game? Buying by force, selling by force, may backfire. It doesn't matter if it's a forced purchase or sale, as long as the Crown Princess of Ziliang knows how good I am to her, it's enough. The Regent of Janai Kingdom spoke so frankly, and he was completely stepping on Bailey Fengming's bottom line. Bailey Fengming was not annoyed at all, he just paused and said, the Regent of Janai Kingdom might as well tell you how he wants to enter the game. The Regent of Janai Kingdom seemed not to have expected that Bailey Fengming would agree so happily, and was slightly taken aback. Now, it is not the Regent of Janai who threatens Bailey Fengming to join the game, but Bailey Fengming, with a scrutinizing attitude, asking the Regent of Janai how to join the game. From passive to active, it's really just a matter of one sentence. The Regent of Janai Kingdom, who had been taking the initiative, was inadvertently suppressed by Bailey Fengming. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 648. Chapter 648. How can there be such a shameless person? I have in my hands the carcasses of rare and rare animals from the ice wasteland and snow fields. So what? I know that the Crown Prince of Ziliang is doing this act to save the Crown Princess from prison, but since it is a show, it must be fake and real. Only in this way can it be foolproof. So as long as the Crown Prince of Ziliang nods, I am willing to unconditionally bring out Bing Huang. The carcasses of rare animals in the snowfield are exchanged for the peace of the crown princess. Bailey Fengming put down the teacup in his hand and smiled slightly. The regent of Genai Kingdom is willing to spend a lot of money. I have said that I have a crush on the crown princess of Ziliang, and I will do everything I can for the woman I love. In this case, I am afraid that I will disappoint the regent of Genai Kingdom. The regent of Genai Kingdom was stunned again. Ayao did have a life-saving favor to the regent of Genai Kingdom, but it was just a life-saving favor. With Ayao's temperament, if he knew that the regent of Genai Kingdom would buy and sell by force afterwards, I'm afraid he would have watched helplessly at the beginning let the regent of Genai die miserably in a foreign country. Bailey Fengming said it very straightforwardly. Perhaps it can be put more simply, your so-called deep love is worthless in the eyes of my wife. And the way you keep showing off your affectionate jokes is just being affectionate. Such harsh words made the regent of the Genai Kingdom change his expression. Is this the character of the Prince of Ziliang? Cultivation and stupidity are not the same thing, so why should the regent of Genai country compare them? The regent of Genai Kingdom. Since arriving in Ziliang, he has heard about and even seen the prince several times. But whether he heard or met him, the impression this prince gave him was completely different now. I have to say that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is indeed very well hidden. Even the regent of Genai Kingdom is not sure whether this appearance is the most real side of him. He always said what he said so openly. If it were anyone else, even if he could hide his resentment, he would probably be unable to hold back his anger. But unfortunately, the prince remained calm and composed from beginning to end, as if it was not his wife who was being cared about. If this is his truest side, it would be a bit scary. Happiness and anger cannot be expressed in color, likes and dislikes cannot be expressed in words. Today, the regent of Genai Kingdom really saw it. If His Royal Highness the Crown Prince of Ziliang agrees, all you need to do is nod, and I will leave the rest to my arrangement. It was obvious that the regent of Genai Kingdom no longer wanted to waste time. Bailey Fengming said, I'm afraid we still need the regent of Genai to wait patiently. Regent of Genai Kingdom. My wife has always had the final say on my family's affairs. This matter is not a child's play. It needs to be decided by my wife after careful discussion with my wife. No matter what my wife decides, I will give an accurate answer to the regent of Genai Kingdom. As soon as the words fell, Bailey Fengming stood up first to say goodbye. The regent of Genai Kingdom. It was obvious that he was desperate, and even the so-called merchant had been killed by him, but Bailey Fengming just didn't want to give him a happy answer, so. I have to say that this matter must be left to the crown princess. The regent of Genai Kingdom looked at Bailey Fengming's leaving figure. No matter how he tasted it, it smelled like dog food. Mr. Sun waited for Bailey Fengming to leave completely before turning around and returning to the room. He looked at the prince who was sitting silently and remained silent for a rare moment. To be honest, this is the first time he has seen someone who can lead the prince by the nose. The regent of Genai Kingdom was also calm. Do you think this king has become a joke? Mr. Sun. This old slave would not dare to say this. The regent of Genai Kingdom smiled faintly, and there was no trace of anger on his handsome face. So what if it becomes a joke now? Only the one who laughs last is the winner. Tell them to be ready at any time. This is what the prince means. This situation has been decided by me. After Bailey Fengming left the restaurant, he went directly to the western suburbs mansion. Externally, Fan Qinjiao has just returned safely from Dali Temple, so it is reasonable for Bailey Fengming to come to visit. Ning Han, who had been waiting at the door for a long time, smiled as soon as she saw His Highness the Crown Prince. I have seen His Highness the Crown Prince. Bailey Fengming walked up the steps and asked softly, where is your lady? The lady is waiting for His Highness in the courtyard. Bailey Fengming nodded and followed Ninggan all the way to Fan Qinjiao's yard. The room where the charcoal fire was burning was warm. Xiao Xian, whose injuries had been taken care of long ago, was drinking freshly made soup under Lin Yi's gaze. When Bailey Fengming entered the door, he saw Fan Qinjiao sitting on the soft couch beside him, looking quietly out of the window. "I don't know what I saw, but I saw God." Xiao Xian finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw His Highness entering the door. "Your Highness." Fan Qinjiao followed the sound and saw Bailey Fengming standing next to the soft couch, looking at her with his eyes closed and a smile. In this situation, even if Xiao Xian and Lin Yi didn't understand love, they still knew how unnecessary they were. They got up and left the room without saying anything. Ningguan saw the two people walking out one after another, and hurriedly stretched out her hand towards the side room, and he has already lit the charcoal pot next door, and the hot tea has been prepared. "You two are following me. Just come." Lin Yi and Xiao Xian were both shocked. To be honest, they were all ready to stand outside and drink the northwest wind. In the end, they were told that there was a warm room and hot tea. As expected of the people around the crown princess, they are attentive and considerate. Lin Yi and Xiao Xian both could imagine the happy life of their chickens and dogs ascending to heaven after the princess married to the East Palace. Through the window, Bailey Fengming looked at Lin Yi and Xiao Xian following Ningguan like dogs, and smiled slightly. "I'm afraid that someone is more anxious than me to get you married into the East Palace now. Fan Qinjiao. What time has it been and you still have the time to joke?" Bailey Fengming knew that she was anxious, so he lifted up his robe and sat on the edge of the couch, telling her everything about what happened in the restaurant just now. Fan Qinjiao just. "I'm really shocked." Bailey Fengming raised his hand and gently clasped her slightly open chin, and said with a smile, "It's rare that something surprises you." When Fan Qinjiao came to his senses, he was still a little surprised. "This regent of Genii Kingdom really surprised me." In fact, after learning that Bailey Fengming was detained by the regent of Genii Kingdom, Fan Qinjiao guessed that the regent of Genii Kingdom wanted to get involved. However, Fan Qinjiao thought that the regent of Genii Kingdom was planning to make a deal. "No matter how bad it is, we will only take action if it is profitable." So Fan Qinjiao never expected that the regent of Genii country could be so shameless. "You don't believe what the regent of Genii said?" Fan Qinjiao raised his eyebrows and looked at Bailey Fengming. "Is there any need to say this? Every time they met, the regent of Genii would hurt other people. The first time was Lanja and the second time was Xiao Xian. Everyone loves their houses and crows, but the regent of Genii Kingdom always brings trouble to fish ponds. This shows that this person's methods are ruthless and his heart is cold, and he doesn't care about anyone at all." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 649. Chapter 649 Is shamelessness still contagious? Bailey Fengming was really a little cold. Seeing that Fan Qinjiao was sitting comfortably on the soft couch, he turned sideways and came to her side, hugged her and leaned against the soft cushion behind him. The fragrance of Zishu Yang instantly enveloped the whole body. Looking at Fan Qinjiao's face full of disgust, Bailey Fengming smiled and said, "It seems that the regent of Genii Kingdom has really offended you." Fan Qinjiao snuggled into Bailey Fengming's arms and frowned slightly. "What are you going to do next? Since the regent of Genii Kingdom is very sincere, it's better to give it a try." Fan Qinjiao nodded, not surprised by Bailey Fengming's answer. The regent of Genii Kingdom seemed to be pleading, but in fact he took a tough stance. The purpose of killing the merchants was simply because they did not want to give them any hesitant retreat. Although Fan Qinjiao has many options and can find other people to act as merchants, the attitude of the regent of Genii Kingdom is unclear now. If they really break up, who knows what kind of trouble will be caused. Moreover, Fan Kinjao always felt that the regent of Janai kingdom was not as innocent as he said. Bailey Fengming had similar thoughts to Fan Kinjao, but there were still many things that he had not smoothed out yet, and he did not want to say more. Noticing that the person in her arms was sinking, Bailey Fengming turned her face to the side and saw that Fan Kinjao, who was leaning against her side, had fallen asleep with her eyes closed. Looking at her peaceful sleeping face, Bailey Fengming sighed almost inaudibly. These past few days, she has been really tormented. Fan Kinjao really didn't expect that he would fall asleep like this. When he opened his eyes, it was completely dark. Ning'an heard the movement in the house and quickly opened the curtain and entered the door. When he saw his young lady, he smiled from ear to ear and said, "Miss, are you hungry?" Fan Kinjao looked at the empty soft couch and asked, "When did the prince leave?" "Half an hour ago, His Highness the Crown Prince specifically told her that there was no need to wake up the young lady, and that she wanted her to sleep a little longer." "Oh, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince also said that there were still many things to be done in the palace, so he left in a hurry. When I have some free time in a few days, I will come to the house to sleep with the lady." Fan Kinjao. Is shamelessness contagious? And he moved very quickly. By the time Fan Kinjao got off the couch, the food was already on the table. Just as Fan Kinjao was about to move his chopsticks, Mu Yan opened the curtain and entered. "But have you disturbed the third sister's meal?" "How come?" "Since you are here, come and eat some with me before leaving." Fan Kinjao quickly asked Ning'an to add chopsticks. Mu Yan held the rice bowl in her hands, but her dark eyes were always looking at Fan Kinjao. "As I looked at it, my eyes started to turn red." Fan Kinjao quickly took out the handkerchief and wiped the corners of her eyes. "What's going on?" Mu Yangan swallowed and said, "I just feel that I am useless. I can't help the third sister in any way. I am not like others who can share the burden for the family." She was frightened and panicked when she heard that her third sister was in jail. The first thing that came to mind was Zhou Renjian, but Zhou Renjian was like coaxing a child, telling him that there was no need for her to worry, and that His Highness the Crown Prince was already thinking of a solution. In the past, Mu Yan would not have thought too much about it. After all, women are supposed to be in the backyard, and it is their duty not to show up in public. But now, in front of her, there was not only the third sister, but also Tianyu and a smiling face. The thought of everyone being able to share the burden for this family made her feel full of guilt. Fan Kinjao looked at Mu Yan's aggrieved look and smiled, "But do you feel you owe something?" Mu Yan nodded with tears in her eyes. "Since I feel that I am indebted, I will take good care of her in the house and wait for her to marry into the Zhou family in a glorious manner." "Muyan. What does it have to do with marrying into the Zhou family?" Fan Kinjao knew that this girl was in over her head again. The power of the Zhou family is enough to help the Hua family gain a foothold in the main city. Once you marry Zhou Renjian, the Hua family and the Zhou family will become in-laws. In the past, when the Hua family fought alone, others could have no scruples. Because in those eyes, when something happens to the Hua family, it is just the fall of the Hua family, but if the Zhou family and the Hua family are tied together because of you, then even if someone wants to take advantage of the Hua family in the future, you have to think carefully about it. Fan Kinjao did not name him by name, but Mu Yan also knew that the person mentioned by the third sister was the current Holy Emperor. After all, the Hua family suffered a huge impact back then. Even now, their fathers are still living outside for this reason. But Mu Yan doesn't think that she is really that important. Why do third sisters need to comfort me? It's not a comfort, it's a fact. One chopstick is easily broken, but 10 chopsticks are enough to hold tightly into a ball. Muyan. As long as you can integrate into the Zhou family well, you will be the Hua family's biggest support. Mu Yan, everyone has their own meaning in life. Instead of dwelling on your own shortcomings, it is better to think about how to use your strengths. Maximize it. Third sister, do you really think so? Mu Yan, you have seen with your own eyes the heavy losses that the Hua family has suffered. If you want to stand firm in the storm, you must find ways to make yourself stronger through your strengths. Fan Kinjao doesn't want to repeat the experience of his last life. But she cannot stay with her sisters forever. The only thing she can do is to let them become independent. Mu Yan really didn't expect that her marriage would still maintain such an important thing. When she really figured it out, her eyes became firm. Third sister, don't worry, I know what to do. Fan Kinjao smiled and gave Mu Yan a piece of fried bacon with chopsticks. My sister can understand everything at once. Mu Yan's heart felt warm and sour at the same time. She found that the third sister was really good at comforting people and knew how to make a person go further. By the way, my mother and the others just came back and asked me to tell third sister that my aunt didn't know about third sister's imprisonment. Uncle Sun also sealed the mouths of everyone in the house. Third sister, don't worry. That's it. While chatting, I almost forgot about the real thing. This is indeed good news for Fan Kinjao. Even if Bailey Fengming plans to join forces with the regent of Janai Kingdom, it will still take some time. Fan Kinjao originally planned to take time to visit his mother, but now it seems that there is no need. Since my mother will give birth later in the year, it won't be too late to visit her after she is completely fine and healthy. After having dinner with Mu Yan, Fan Kinjao went to his brother's place with Mu Yan. Hua Fengning went to a nearby some time ago and was about to come back. He heard the news about Fan Kinjao's accident from his wife's mouth, and was about to go to Fan Kinjao's yard when he saw Fan Kinjao come in. Hurry up and have a look. Hua Fengning rushed to Fan Kinjao in one swift step and looked at him carefully by candlelight. Those who didn't know thought Fan Kinjao was blooming. Fan Kinjao was helpless, but he couldn't say anything. Fortunately, Wu Kaiozwo smiled and said, Kinjao is about to get married. Even if you are an elder brother, you must have some sense of proportion. Only then did Hua Fengning react. He quickly pulled Fan Kinjao and Mu Yan to sit down together, and asked carefully what happened. When he knew that Princess Rui was dead, the two sword eyebrows were tightened together. Fan Kinjao didn't want his brother to worry, so he comforted him, the murderer has been found, so I don't need to worry anymore. Of course, Hua Fengning knew that things were definitely not as easy as Fan Kinjao said, but seeing that Fan Kinjao didn't want to say more, he didn't ask any more questions and just warned carefully, Little Kinjao, I'm afraid the road ahead will be difficult. It's getting more and more dangerous, so remember to take care of yourself. Fan Kinjao smiled sweetly, brother, don't worry. Hua Fengning knew that a man shouldn't be like this, but he felt uneasy if he didn't say it out loud. He pulled Fan Kinjao and talked about it for a long time, and after he finished speaking, he didn't forget to ask his wife's opinion. Chuzhou, do you think so? Autumn autumn. Hua Fengning shouted several times in succession, but received no response. When Wu Kaiozeo came to her senses, she saw everyone in the room looking at her. A trace of panic flashed in Wu Kaiozwo's eyes, and he smiled quickly and said, everything you said is right. Hua Fengning is a man after all, and he doesn't have such delicate thoughts. But Fan Kinjao could clearly see that his sister-in-law had something on her mind. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 650. Chapter 650. Just leave this matter to me. Seeing that his brother was still talking, Fan Kinjao quickly smiled and said, isn't it true that my brother hasn't gone to pay his respects to my grandfather and grandmother when he comes back? Hua Fengning. I was just concentrating on the ink, but I forgot about it. It's not very late yet, so my brother should go and say hello to his grandfather and grandmother first. Hua Fengning actually still had a lot to say, but the Hua family's tutoring had always been strict. He thought that if he didn't go today, he might be scolded by his grandfather tomorrow, so he could only bite the bullet and walk out. Yan saw that her brother had gone out, but her third sister had no intention of leaving, so she guessed a little and took the initiative to go back to her yard. Fan Kinjao then walked to the soft couch and sat down. He looked at Wu Qiuzao and asked, "What trouble has happened to my sister-in-law?" These words shocked Wu Qiuzao. Is it so obvious? She was just afraid that her husband would notice something. Fan Kinjao could tell her thoughts at a glance. "Sister-in-law, don't worry, my brother didn't notice it." Wu Qiuzao. Suddenly I felt very fortunate that not everyone was as smart as Fan Kinjao. Actually, it's not a big deal. The Kong family sent me a letter a few days ago, saying that Kong Qingying will be getting married in a few days. She will be married to a small village outside the main city. I heard that she is the concubine of a rich man. Waiter, counting on it, it happens to be tomorrow. Fan Kinjao didn't expect that the ghost of the Kong family was still lingering. Even if Wu Qiuzao and Kong Qingying have been in love since childhood, so what? When something like that happened, if the Kong family really cared about their feelings, they would not have come to harass Wu Qiuzao. Even if he really wanted to invite Wu Qiuzao to see him off, there was no need to explain Kong Qingying's situation in such detail. This is obviously to make Wu Qiuzao feel guilty. Fan Kinjao really didn't have any good impressions of those people from the Kong family. But looking at the troubled Wu Qiuzao, Fan Kinjao couldn't speak so straightforwardly. "What do you think, sister-in-law? Kong Qingying and I grew up together, and it would be a lie to say we have no feelings for each other. I thought she was going to get married soon, and everything in the past should be written off, otherwise I would always look like a petty person." "Sister-in-law, you want to see her off?" Wu Qiuzao was silent for a long time before nodding. Of course Fan Kinjao couldn't let Wu Qiuzao see him off. With the Kong family's peeing habits, who knew what they might plan? "But I think so, but I can't say it. My sister-in-law wants to go, but it's not impossible. When my brother comes back later, I will ask him to accompany you." Wu Qiuzao interrupted directly, "No. Even if she could forgive Kong Qingying for what she had done, she was still a woman. Is she crazy and actively pushing her husband in front of Kong Qingying?" Fan Kinjao was waiting for the sentence. "I understand what my sister-in-law is thinking, but she is still pregnant. If she goes out alone, let alone my brother, my grandfather and grandmother will not be able to rest assured. I know that my sister-in-law is worried about the Miss Kong family still has feelings for each other, but it would be bad if there is a gap between my sister-in-law and my grandfather because of the Miss Kong family." Wu Qiuzao was silent. She understood the truth, but she just didn't know how to choose. "Why don't you leave this matter to me, sister-in-law?" Wu Qiuzao was stunned. Fan Kinjao smiled and said, "Sister-in-law, do you think I'm not worthy?" Wu Qiuzao shook his head quickly. "How could it be possible? You are the crown princess. I just don't think the Kong family is worthy of it." Fan Kinjao felt relieved after hearing this. Fortunately, she can distinguish the importance. As long as her heart is towards the Hua family, she can handle this matter. My sister-in-law is my elder when she marries my brother. The so-called identity is only told to outsiders. If my sister-in-law can trust me, I will handle this matter. If the Kong family really complains that my sister-in-law does not come forward, sister-in-law, then such friends are really dispensable." Wu Qiuzao discovered that his sister-in-law can really talk. It was as if he knew what she was thinking, and every word he spoke to her heart. Perhaps, this is knowledge that she will never learn. Fan Kinjao waited for his brother to come back before getting up and leaving. After returning to his yard, the first thing Fan Kinjao did was to call Ningtian in front of him. "I will ask Auntie to go to the warehouse in the yard to find a century-old ginseng, and tomorrow you will take it to the Kong family in person." As soon as Ningyan entered the door, she heard the young lady's words. Although she didn't know what happened, she felt extremely sick when she thought of the Kong family. a century-old ginseng, the Kong family deserves it too. Tomorrow is Miss Kong's happy day. Since our Hua family is taking action, we can't be laughed at. Fan Qinjiao smiled lightly. Only the more valuable things are, the more it can show that Wu Qiuzhou married Hua. Status of home. Moreover, century-old ginseng may be rare to others, but to Fan Qinjiao, this kind of thing is really not that precious. King Nanzai buys medicinal materials of many years at a high price every month. 1,000-year-old wild ginseng, it's not like Fan Qinjiao can't do anything. But based on the Kong family, they really don't deserve it. This kind of thing should be left to Aunt He to make people happy. It's not that Ning'an has no confidence in her sister, it's just that compared to Aunt He's fierceness, her sister is obviously a boring gourd. You have to speak less to be more effective. Grandma He has extraordinary momentum, but if you want to deal with the Kong family, momentum is secondary, and attitude is the most important. Fan Qinjiao looked at Ning Tian and said, no need to say anything, just throw the things over there and come back. Since the Kong family wanted to invite Wu Qiuzhou to go, they had to be careful. Fan Qinjiao knew what the Kong family was planning without even thinking about it. Since the Kong family is shameless, there is no need for her to get used to it. After everything was explained, Lin Yi left and came back. Probably because of the Huajia tea, Lin Yi's respect for Fan Qinjiao was visible to the naked eye. Your Highness has sent a message to the regent of the Genii Kingdom, and the regent of the Genii Kingdom replied. After that, he said that His Highness and the Crown Princess would go to the restaurant together in 5 days. 5 days, this is really not a short time. To be honest, everything seems to be going in a good direction now. But the regent of Genii Kingdom has a deep city and a deep scheming mind. It is really difficult to see through it. Furthermore, how could a person who is so full of interests really help someone for no reason? But unfortunately, the regent of Genii Kingdom did just that. And from the current perspective, what he did was very selfless. Fan Qinjiao wanted to get the things immediately and settle the matter completely. But you can't eat hot tofu in a hurry. The more anxious you are, the more slowly you have to take your time. This way you won't make any mistakes. After sending Lin Yi away, Fan Qinjiao lay on the bed, but couldn't sleep for a long time. I always feel that things are clear before my eyes, but there are still many details hidden in the darkness. End of this chapter.